As the morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Willow Creek's general store, Eliza Turner clutched her worn carpetbag with white-knuckled determination. The journey from Boston had left her exhausted, her fine city clothes now travel-stained, and her hopes hanging by a thread as thin as her remaining funds. She needed work, and she needed it desperately before her past caught up with her. "Excuse me," Eliza said, approaching the store owner, a balding man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "I understand Mr. Bennett is looking for household help at his ranch outside of town. Could you direct me there?" The shopkeeper looked up from his ledger, eyeing her with open curiosity. "You're looking to work for Kade Bennett." He let out a low whistle. "Prettiest ranch in Wyoming territory, but the man himself is as prickly as a cactus. Lost his wife 3 years back in '74, ain't been the same since." "I'm not concerned with his temperament," Eliza replied, straightening her shoulders. "I simply need employment." The man shrugged. "Follow the North Trail out of town about 4 miles. Can't miss it, big white house standing proud as you please with the Rocking Bee brand on the gate." With a grateful nod, Eliza purchased a few necessities, a loaf of bread, some jerky, and a small tin of coffee before heading out. The April sun warmed her face as she walked, the vast Wyoming landscape stretching around her like an ocean of grass punctuated by distant mountains. After 2 hours of walking, her city boots rubbing blisters on her heels, she finally spotted it, a sprawling white house surrounded by cottonwoods, with several outbuildings and corrals spread across the property. Her heart quickened as she approached the main house. It was far grander than she had anticipated, with a wide veranda and carefully tended flower beds that seemed at odds with her notion of a rough cattle ranch. Taking a deep breath, she climbed the steps and knocked on the front door. No answer came. Eliza knocked again, louder this time, but still no response. She was about to turn away when she heard the rhythmic pounding of a hammer from around the side of the house. Following the sound, she made her way past a kitchen garden to find a broad-shouldered man repairing a section of fence. "Excuse me," she called out, shielding her eyes from the sun. "I'm looking for Mr. Bennett." The man turned, and Eliza found herself face to face with the most striking pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen. They were set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a shock of dark hair, currently hatless and damp with sweat. He straightened, towering over her 5'4" frame by nearly a foot. "You found him," he said, his deep voice tinged with wariness as he studied her, his gaze traveling from her dusty boots to her travel-worn dress. "What can I do for you, miss?" Eliza swallowed hard. "My name is Eliza Turner. I heard in town that you're in need of a maid." "I've come to apply for the position." Kade Bennett stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Is that so?" he asked, setting down his hammer and wiping his hands on his denim trousers. "And what would a lady like yourself know about the kind of work that needs doing around here?" His tone wasn't unkind, but there was something in it that made Eliza bristle. "I assure you, Mr. Bennett, I'm no stranger to hard work. I can cook, clean, mend, garden, whatever is required." He studied her again, more carefully this time. "Where are you from, Miss Turner? Your accent isn't local." "Boston," she answered, then added quickly, "but I'm adaptable." "Boston," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's a mighty long way to travel for a position as a maid." Eliza lifted her chin. "I have my reasons." "I'm sure you do." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Everyone who ends up in Wyoming territory has reasons." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them until he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Miss Turner, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm not looking to hire a maid." Her heart sank. "But in town they said—" "I know what they say in town," he interrupted, a flash of irritation crossing his features. "Folks think I need a woman's touch around the place. They've been trying to send maids, cooks, and unmarried daughters my way for the past year." "Oh." Eliza clutched her carpetbag tighter, fighting back a wave of desperation. "I see. Something in her expression must have reached him because his face softened slightly. "You look like you've had a long journey. At least come in for some coffee before you head back to town." Before she could respond, a high-pitched voice called out, "Pa, come quick. Daisy's got her head stuck in the fence again." A young girl of about 8 came running around the corner, her braids flying and her calico dress smudged with dirt. She skidded to a halt when she saw Eliza, her large blue eyes identical to her father's widening with surprise. "Hello," she said, momentarily forgetting her emergency. "Hello," Eliza replied with a small smile. Kade sighed. "Miss Turner, this is my daughter, Sarah. Sarah, this is Miss Turner. She came looking for work." Sarah's face lit up. "Are you going to be our new maid? Can you bake cookies?" Mrs. Miller used to bake cookies before she got married and moved away. "Sarah," Kade said firmly, "Miss Turner isn't staying. Now, what's this about Daisy?" "Oh," the girl remembered her mission. "She's got her head stuck in the fence by the chicken coop. I tried to get her out, but she won't budge. That goat," Kade muttered, shaking his head. He looked at Eliza. "If you'll excuse me, Miss Turner, that offer of coffee stands if you want to wait on the porch." With that, he strode off, his daughter leading the way. Eliza stood uncertainly, watching them go. She should leave now, head back to town and try her luck elsewhere. But where would she go? Her funds were nearly depleted, and the train fare west had taken most of what she'd had left after fleeing Boston. Instead of leaving, she followed them. Around the back of the house, past a vegetable garden in need of weeding, she found Kade and Sarah at a small fenced area where a white goat had indeed wedged its head through the slats, bleeding mournfully. "Stubborn creature," Kade was saying as he tried to maneuver the goat's head back through the fence. "I told you not to feed her near the fence line, Sarah." "I didn't, Pa. She must have seen something she wanted on the other side." Eliza set down her bag and moved closer. "May I?" she asked. Kade looked up in surprise. "Be my guest," he said, stepping back. Eliza approached slowly, murmuring softly to the distressed goat. "There now, it's all right," she soothed, gently stroking the animal's neck. She felt around the fence slats, assessing the situation. "Mr. Bennett, do you have any butter or grease we could use?" "Butter? For a goat?" To slick her ears back so they'll slide through. He looked at her appraisingly before nodding to Sarah. "Go fetch the butter from the kitchen, quick now." When Sarah returned with a small crock of butter, Eliza carefully applied it to the goat's ears, folding them back as she worked. All the while she spoke gently to the animal, her hands sure and steady. "Now," she said, positioning herself behind the goat, "I'm going to push while you guide her head, Mr. Bennett." Working together, they managed to free the goat, who immediately pranced away as if nothing had happened. Sarah clapped her hands in delight. "That was amazing," the girl exclaimed. "How did you know what to do?" "I grew up around animals," Eliza said simply, wiping her hands on her handkerchief. Kade was looking at her with newfound respect. "I think we'd better have that coffee now," he said. "Sarah, go wash up and start on your lessons. I'll be in shortly." Sarah groaned but obeyed, giving Eliza a gap-toothed smile before skipping toward the house. As they walked back, Kade glanced sideways at Eliza. "You said you're from Boston. Don't recall many goats in the city." "My grandparents had a small farm outside the city," she replied. "I spent summers there as a child." Inside the kitchen, Eliza was struck by the contrast between the well-built house and its state of disarray. It wasn't dirty, exactly, but it lacked the organized touch of someone who knew how to manage a household. Dishes were stacked haphazardly, the stove needed blacking, and the curtains hung unevenly at the windows. Kade seemed to notice her assessing gaze. "It's not much to look at right now," he admitted as he moved to stoke the fire in the stove. "Sarah and I manage, but—" "It's a lovely home," Eliza said quickly. "Very spacious," he snorted. "That's a polite way of saying it's a mess." He measured coffee into a pot and set it on the stove. "My wife, Elizabeth, she kept everything just so. After she passed, well, I never quite figured out how she managed it all." Eliza sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing a scratch in the wood. "I'm sorry for your loss." "It's been 3 years," he said, his back to her as he watched the coffee pot. "Sarah doesn't remember her mother much. Sometimes I think that's a blessing." They fell silent until the coffee was ready. Kade poured 2 cups and set one before her, then took a seat across the table. "So," he said after taking a sip, "what really brings a Boston lady all the way to Wyoming territory looking for work as a maid?" Eliza stared into her cup. "A fresh start," she said finally. "Isn't that why most people come west, running from something or running to something?" he pressed. She met his gaze steadily. "Does it matter?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I suppose not." He drummed his fingers on the table, seeming to consider something. "I meant what I said earlier. I'm not looking to hire a maid." Eliza's heart sank again, but she nodded. "I understand. I appreciate the coffee, and I'll be on my way back to town." "I didn't say you had to leave," he said slowly, his blue eyes intent on her face. "What I need isn't a maid, Miss Turner. What I need is someone who can help run this household, look after Sarah when I'm working the range, and bring some order back to our lives." He took a deep breath. "I need a governess for my daughter and someone to manage the house." Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. "I can do that." "It's not easy work," he warned. "This isn't Boston. Winters are harsh, comforts are few, and the nearest neighbor is 3 miles away." "Mr. Bennett," Eliza said with quiet dignity, "I didn't come west expecting easy." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. Room and board plus $20 a month. We can try it for a month, see how it works out." "Thank you," she said, relief washing through her. "When would you like me to start?" A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his features and making her pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Miss Turner, from the looks of this kitchen, I'd say you're not hired, you're already indispensable." The words were spoken lightly, but something in his gaze made her cheeks warm. For the first time since leaving Boston, Eliza felt a flicker of hope that perhaps she had found not just employment, but a place where she might belong. The next morning, Eliza rose before dawn, determined to prove her worth. She had spent the night in a small but comfortable bedroom off the kitchen that had previously belonged to Mrs. Miller, the former housekeeper Sarah had mentioned. After unpacking her meager belongings, she had fallen into an exhausted sleep, only to wake with the first birdsong. The kitchen was cold when she entered it, and she quickly set about building a fire in the stove. By the time she heard movement upstairs, she had coffee brewing, biscuits baking, and bacon sizzling in a pan. Kade appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, clearly surprised to find breakfast nearly ready. "You're up early," he observed. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she replied, sliding the biscuits from the oven. "I thought I'd get an early start." He inhaled deeply, appreciation clear on his face. "Smells like heaven." "Pa," Sarah's sleepy voice called from upstairs. "Is someone cooking?" "Come down and see for yourself," he called back, then turned to Eliza. "You didn't have to do all this." "It's part of my duties," she said simply. "Besides, I enjoy cooking." Sarah bounded into the kitchen, her hair a tangled mess but her eyes bright with excitement when she saw the spread on the table. "Real biscuits," she exclaimed. "And they're not burned." "Sarah," Kade admonished, but Eliza laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment," she said, setting a plate of bacon on the table. "Now sit down before it gets cold." As they ate, Kade outlined the day's schedule. "I'll be riding out with the hands to check the north pasture. We've had wolves troubling the calves. I should be back by supper." He looked at Sarah. "You mind Miss Turner today, you hear? No running off, no tricks." Sarah nodded solemnly, though Eliza caught a mischievous glint in her eye. After breakfast, Kade departed, and Eliza set about assessing the state of the household. The more she explored, the more she realized how much work lay ahead. The house itself was beautifully constructed. Kade had mentioned he'd built it himself when he married, but it had clearly been maintained by a man who prioritized function over form. Miss Turner. Sarah asked, following her from room to room. "What are we going to do today?" "Well," Eliza said, thinking, "first I thought we'd get to know each other a bit, then perhaps you could show me around the ranch, and afterward we'll start on your lessons." Sarah made a face. Do I have to do lessons? Pa usually just has me read a chapter from the Bible and do some sums. Education is important, Sarah, Eliza said gently, even out here, especially for a young lady. But I'm going to be a rancher like Pa, the girl declared. I don't need books for that. Eliza smiled. Your father reads, doesn't he? I saw books in his study. Sarah nodded reluctantly. He reads every night. Then I'd say reading is pretty important for a rancher too. Over the next few hours, Sarah proved to be an energetic but willing guide, showing Eliza around the property with pride. The rocking bee was impressive, over 5,000 acres, with several hundred head of cattle, a dozen horses, and various other livestock. 4 ranch hands lived in a bunkhouse near the barn, and there was a cook who prepared meals for the men but left the main house to Kade and Sarah. Pa says we have the best water rights in the county, Sarah informed her as they walked along a creek that ran through the property. That's why our grass stays green longer than anybody else's. Your father must work very hard, Eliza observed. Sarah nodded. The hardest. Mama used to say he was stubborn as a mule but gentle as a lamb. Her face clouded. I don't remember her very well anymore. Eliza's heart ached for the child. It's hard to lose someone you love. How did you know? Sarah asked, her blue eyes suddenly intense. Know what? That I loved her. Pa says I was too little to remember loving her. Eliza knelt down to Sarah's level. Love doesn't always need memories, Sarah. Sometimes it's just there in your heart. The girl considered this, then nodded. I think you're right. She suddenly brightened. Do you want to see my secret place? I'd love to. Sarah led her to a small clearing near the creek where a massive cottonwood tree spread its branches. Between 2 low branches was a crudely constructed platform, a tree house of sorts. Pa built it for me last summer, Sarah explained proudly. I come here when I want to be alone or when I'm sad. It's wonderful, Eliza said sincerely. Thank you for sharing it with me, Sarah beamed. You can come here too if you want when you're sad. The simple generosity of the child touched Eliza deeply. That's very kind of you, Sarah. By mid-afternoon, they had returned to the house, and Eliza had managed to coax Sarah through some reading and arithmetic lessons. The girl was bright but easily distracted, clearly used to more freedom than structure in her days. As Eliza prepared supper, a hearty stew with the last of the winter vegetables, and some fresh bread, she reflected on her first day at the Rocking Bee. Despite the work ahead, there was something appealing about the place, a sense of possibility that had been absent in her life for too long. Kade returned just as the sun was setting, bringing with him the scent of horses and open air. He looked tired but satisfied as he hung his hat by the door. Something smells good, he said by way of greeting. Miss Turner made stew, Sarah announced from where she was setting the table. And she taught me a new word today, persevere. Persevere, Eliza corrected gently. It means to continue doing something despite difficulties. An appropriate word for ranch life, Kade commented, washing his hands at the sink. How was your first day, Miss Turner? Illuminating, she replied with a small smile. Your daughter is an excellent guide. I showed her everything, Sarah said proudly, even my tree house. Kade's eyebrows rose. Did you now? That's quite an honor, Miss Turner. Sarah doesn't share that place with just anyone. I was honored, Eliza said, meeting Sarah's gaze with a warm smile. During supper, Kade recounted his day, the wolves they'd tracked, the calves they'd checked, the fence that needed mending in the east pasture. It was clear he took immense pride in his land and his work. Mr. Bennett, Eliza said as she served him a second helping of stew, I was wondering if I might have permission to rearrange some things in the kitchen. It would help me work more efficiently. This is your domain now, Miss Turner, he replied. Arrange it however you see fit. And perhaps I could order some supplies from town. The pantry is rather bare and Sarah's dresses could use some mending. He nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small leather pouch. Here's money for supplies. Make a list of what you need, and I'll have one of the hands take you to town in the wagon this Saturday. Thank you. Their fingers brushed as she took the pouch, and Eliza felt a surprising flutter in her stomach at the contact. That night, after Sarah was tucked in bed and Kade had retired to his study with a book, Eliza sat by the kitchen window, gazing out at the star-filled Wyoming sky. It was so different from Boston, so vast and open, with no buildings to block the view, no streets crowded with people, no watchful eyes tracking her movements. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax slightly. Perhaps here, in this remote ranch with its broken-hearted owner and motherless child, she could finally escape the shadows that had driven her west. Little did she know that shadows had a way of stretching across even the widest prairies. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Each day, Eliza rose early to prepare breakfast, then spent the morning on household tasks while Sarah did her lessons. Afternoons were often devoted to teaching Sarah practical skills: sewing, cooking, gardening interspersed with reading and arithmetic. By evening, when Kade returned from his work, the house had begun to transform. Curtains hung straight and freshly laundered, floors gleamed with polish, and meals were served on time with increasing variety. The trip to town had yielded fabric for new curtains, yarn for mending, seeds for the garden, and books for Sarah's education. What surprised Eliza most, however, was how quickly she'd grown fond of the ranch and its inhabitants. Sarah's exuberant spirit and honest affection were impossible to resist, and the girl had attached herself to Eliza with wholehearted enthusiasm. Kade remained more reserved, but Eliza often caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Sometimes when their paths crossed in the narrow hallway or reaching for the same dish at the table, there was a moment of tension, a held breath, before one of them would step back with a murmured apology. One evening in late May, nearly a month after her arrival, Eliza was hanging fresh laundry on the line behind the house when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Kade riding in, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. There was something in his posture, a weariness, perhaps, that made her pause. He dismounted slowly, patting his horse's neck before leading it toward the barn. On impulse, Eliza set down her basket and followed him. "Mr. Bennett," she called softly, entering the dim interior of the barn. "Is everything all right?" He was removing the saddle from his horse, his movements mechanical. "Just tired, Miss Turner." Eliza wasn't convinced. "You missed supper. I've kept a plate warm for you." "Thank you," he said, not looking at her. "I'll be in shortly." She hesitated, then took a step closer. "Has something happened?" Kade sighed, finally turning to face her. In the lantern light, she could see a deep cut along his cheekbone and bruising around his eye. "Oh," she exclaimed, moving forward without thinking. "You're hurt." His mouth tightened. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," she insisted, reaching up to examine the cut. "This needs cleaning." "What happened?" For a moment, he seemed about to brush her off, but then his shoulders sagged slightly. "Had a disagreement with Tucker Harris in town. He and his boys have been cutting my fences and rustling calves. I confronted him at the saloon. And it came to blows," Eliza finished, frowning. "Sit down, let me fetch some water and bandages." "Miss Turner, sit," she repeated firmly, pointing to a hay bale. To her surprise, he complied, watching her with a mixture of amusement and something else as she hurried to fetch supplies from the house. When she returned, he was where she'd left him, hat off, running a hand through his dark hair. "Sarah asleep?" he asked as Eliza wet a clean cloth. "Yes, hours ago." She stood before him, hesitating. "This might sting." "I've had worse," he said wryly. As gently as possible, Eliza cleaned the cut, acutely aware of their proximity. This close, she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the lines at their corners that deepened when he winced. "Sorry," she murmured. "It's fine." His voice had dropped to a near whisper. The silence between them grew charged as she worked, her fingers occasionally brushing his skin. When she finally stepped back, Kade caught her wrist. "Thank you," he said, his eyes holding hers. "You're welcome," she replied, her voice unsteady. Neither moved for a long moment, and Eliza felt something shift between them, a boundary crossed, perhaps, or a wall lowered. Then the horse nickered, breaking the spell, and Kade released her wrist. I should finish seeing to Diablo, he said, rising. And I should check on Sarah, Eliza replied, gathering her supplies. Your supper is waiting in the kitchen. As she walked back to the house, her heart beating faster than normal, Eliza knew something had changed. What exactly, she wasn't sure, but she felt it as clearly as the approaching summer in the air. The next morning, Kade's eye was swollen and discolored, prompting a barrage of questions from Sarah at breakfast. Did you win the fight, Pa? She asked, eyes wide with fascination. Sarah, Eliza admonished, that's not an appropriate question. It's all right, Kade said, smiling slightly despite his bruised face. Yes, I won the fight, but that's not something to be proud of, Sarah. Fighting should always be a last resort. Then why did you do it? The girl pressed. Kade's expression grew serious. Because sometimes you have to stand up for what's yours, even when it's difficult. His eyes flickered to Eliza. Some things are worth fighting for. The intensity of his gaze made Eliza look away, focusing on serving more eggs. Sarah, after breakfast, I thought we might work in the garden today. The seeds we planted are starting to sprout. Can we plant flowers too? Sarah asked, easily distracted. Mama had roses by the front porch. I remember, Kade said softly. Red ones. We could plant roses, Eliza suggested, though they'll take time to grow. Everything worth having takes time, Kade said, rising from the table. I'll be checking the South Range today with the men. Harris and his boys were spotted there yesterday. Be careful, Eliza said before she could stop herself. He paused, looking back at her with surprise, then nodded. Always am. After he left, Eliza and Sarah spent the morning in the vegetable garden, weeding around the tender shoots of beans, corn, and peas. The warmth of the sun felt good on Eliza's back as she worked, listening to Sarah's chatter about a frog she'd found by the creek and how she planned to build a proper fence for Daisy the goat. Miss Turner, Sarah said suddenly, her small hands dirty from the soil, do you like my pa? Eliza nearly dropped her trowel. What? Of course I like your father, he's been very kind to employ me. Sarah rolled her eyes in a manner surprisingly adult. Not like that, like him. Sarah Bennett, Eliza said firmly, hoping the girl wouldn't notice her flushed cheeks. That's not an appropriate question either. Why not? Sarah persisted. Tommy Wilson from town said his ma thinks you and Pa should get married. She says Pa's been alone too long and needs a wife, and you need a husband 'cause you're too pretty to be a governess forever. Eliza was momentarily speechless. Tommy Wilson's mother shouldn't be gossiping about such things, and neither should you, she finally managed. Now let's focus on these beans, shall we? But Sarah wasn't ready to drop the subject. Would you want to marry Pa if he asked you? Then you could be my mama. There was such hope in the child's eyes that Eliza felt her heart constrict. Sarah, she said gently, your father and I have a working arrangement. He employs me to look after you and the house, that's all. But he looks at you funny sometimes, Sarah insisted. Like he used to look at Mama in the picture by his bed. Eliza didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject, asking Sarah to fetch more water for the seedlings. As the girl skipped off toward the pump, Eliza sat back on her heels, troubled by the conversation. She couldn't deny that she'd grown to admire Kade Bennett. He was hardworking, principled, and clearly devoted to his daughter and his land. And yes, there were moments when something passed between them that made her pulse quicken, but anything beyond their current arrangement was impossible. She had secrets that made any deeper relationship unthinkable. That evening, Kade returned later than usual, his expression grim as he entered the kitchen where Eliza was cleaning up after supper. Sarah's in bed, he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Yes, she was tired from gardening today. Eliza studied his face. More trouble. He nodded, taking a long sip. Found 2 of my calves slaughtered and left to rot, just spite pure and simple. Harris is trying to drive me off this land. Why? Eliza asked, setting aside her dishcloth. What does he want with your ranch? Water rights, Kade explained, leaning against the counter. The creek that runs through my property feeds his land downstream. He wants control of it, especially with the dry summers we've been having." He ran a hand over his face. "I've complained to the sheriff, but Harris has friends in town. Nothing ever comes of it." "That's terrible," Eliza said, anger rising on his behalf. "There must be something that can be done." "Short of catching him in the act, not much." He looked at her, his expression softening. "But enough about my troubles. How was your day with Sarah?" Eliza hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Enlightening. She seems to be under the impression that, well, that there might be more between us than an employment arrangement." Kade stilled, his cup halfway to his lips. "What did she say?" "She asked if I would marry you if you asked," Eliza admitted, unable to meet his eyes. "Apparently there's talk in town." He set his cup down with a soft thud. "I see." "I told her it was inappropriate to discuss such things," Eliza hurried on. "I made it clear that our relationship is strictly professional." "Of course," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm sorry if she made you uncomfortable." "It's all right," Eliza assured him. "She's a child. She misses her mother." Kade was quiet for a moment, then said, "You've been good for her, Miss Turner. She's happier than I've seen her in a long time." "She's a wonderful girl," Eliza said sincerely. "You've raised her well." "Not well enough," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "A girl needs a mother's guidance." "I do my best, but—" He trailed off, then straightened. "Well, it's getting late. I should let you retire." As he turned to leave, Eliza found herself speaking. "Mr. Bennett," he paused, looking back at her. "I'm glad I came here," she said simply. "Whatever Sarah's imaginations, I want you to know I value my position here greatly." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment. Relief. She couldn't tell. "Good night, Miss Turner," he said softly. "Good night, Mr. Bennett." After he left, Eliza stood in the kitchen for a long time, her thoughts in turmoil. She'd come to Wyoming to escape her past, not to complicate her future. Yet with each passing day, she found herself more drawn to this man and his daughter, to the life they were building on this wild, beautiful land. But the shadows of Boston still loomed, threatening to engulf everything if she allowed herself to forget why she'd fled in the first place. June brought scorching heat and cloudless skies. The creek that cut through the Rocking Bee property ran lower each day, and Kade spent long hours ensuring the cattle had access to water. The garden required constant attention to keep it from withering, and Eliza and Sarah made a ritual of evening watering, using buckets hauled from the well. Despite the heat, life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Eliza found herself settling deeper into her role, no longer just a governess and housekeeper, but something more, a confidante to Sarah, a partner in managing the household, and increasingly, a friend to Kade. Their conversations over evening coffee had become a ritual of sorts. After Sarah was in bed, they would sit at the kitchen table, discussing the day's events, Sarah's progress with her lessons, or books they had read. Kade proved to be surprisingly well-read for a rancher, with a small but thoughtful collection of classics in his study. "My wife insisted on bringing books west," he explained one evening when Eliza commented on his copy of David Copperfield. "Said a house wasn't a home without books." "She was right," Eliza said, smiling. "Books are windows to other worlds." "Is that why you read so much?" he asked. To escape to other worlds, the question hit closer to home than he could know. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Though lately I've found this world quite engaging enough." His eyes warmed at that, and Eliza felt the now familiar flutter in her chest. These moments had been happening more frequently, glances held a beat too long, fingers brushing when passing a dish, conversations that edged toward personal territories before retreating to safer ground. One particularly hot afternoon in late June, Eliza was in the kitchen making preparations for supper when she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the window, she saw a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of town. As it drew closer, she made out a wagon driven by a man she didn't recognize, with another man riding alongside on horseback, Setting aside her work, she stepped onto the porch just as Kade emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. He strode toward the approaching visitors, his posture tense. "Stay inside, Miss Turner," he called over his shoulder. Instead, she moved to the edge of the porch, concern overriding his instruction. The wagon pulled up in the yard, and she recognized the rider as Sheriff Mills from town, a portly man with a drooping mustache whom she'd met during her shopping trips. "Bennett," the sheriff greeted, tipping his hat. "Got some business to discuss." "What kind of business brings you out in this heat, Sheriff?" Kade asked, his rifle not quite pointed at the ground. The man in the wagon spoke up. "The kind that involves stolen property, Bennett. You know damn well what I'm talking about." Eliza recognized Tucker Harris from Kade's description, a tall, lean man with a scar running from his left eye to his jawline. His expression was pure malice as he stared at Kade. "I don't know what you're talking about, Harris," Kade replied evenly, "and I'll thank you to watch your language." "There are ladies present." Harris spat on the ground. "Ladies, is that what you call her?" His eyes shifted to Eliza, and something in his gaze made her skin crawl. "Funny sort of governess you've got, Bennett, one who shows up out of nowhere with no references, no family to speak of." Eliza froze. "How could he know anything about her?" "That's enough," Kade said, his voice dangerously low. "State your business or get off my land," Sheriff Mills sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Harris here claims you stole 2 of his prize bulls. Says they went missing 3 days ago and were seen on your property." "That's a lie," Kade said flatly. "I haven't taken anything of his. If he's missing bulls, perhaps he should look to his own poor management." Harris sneered. "Sheriff, I demand you search his property." "Those bulls are worth $500 apiece." "You have no right to search my property without cause," Kade countered. "And Harris knows it. This is harassment, plain and simple." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "Look, Bennett, I'm just trying to keep the peace here. If you've got nothing to hide, a quick look around your south pasture would settle this." Kade's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. "Fine, we'll ride out there now, but Harris stays here." "The hell I will," Harris protested. "Either you stay or there's no search," Kade insisted. "I don't want you anywhere near my cattle or my land." After a tense standoff, Harris grudgingly agreed to wait by the wagon. Kade turned to Eliza. "Miss Turner, please go inside and stay with Sarah. I'll be back shortly." Eliza nodded, but as she turned to go, Harris called out, "You might want to ask your governess where she was the night of April 15th. Might be interesting to know." She stumbled slightly on the steps, heart racing. April 15th, the night she'd fled Boston, the night everything had changed. Kade noticed her reaction but said nothing, simply mounting his horse and leading the sheriff away toward the south pasture. Inside, Eliza found Sarah reading in the parlor, blissfully unaware of the confrontation outside. "Is something wrong?" the girl asked, looking up from her book. "You're pale as a ghost." "Everything's fine," Eliza assured her, forcing a smile. "Your father is showing the sheriff something in the south pasture. Why don't we finish that reading lesson while we wait?" But her mind was elsewhere as Sarah stumbled through a passage from Little Women. How had Harris known? Had someone from Boston tracked her here? The thought sent ice through her veins despite the summer heat. Nearly an hour passed before she heard horses returning. Excusing herself, she went to the window and watched as Kade and the sheriff rode into the yard. Harris was pacing by the wagon, his face dark with anger. "Nothing there, Harris," the sheriff was saying as Eliza opened the front door. "Not a sign of your bulls." "He's hidden them," Harris insisted, "or sold them already." "That's enough," the sheriff said firmly. "I've seen no evidence of stolen cattle. You've wasted my time and Bennett's with these accusations." Harris pointed a finger at Kade. "This isn't over, Bennett, not by a long shot." "I believe it is," Kade replied coldly. "Get off my land, Harris, and don't come back." With a final venomous glare, Harris climbed back into his wagon and snapped the reins. The sheriff lingered a moment longer. "Sorry about this, Bennett," he said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "But I had to check, you understand." Kade nodded stiffly. "I understand you were doing your job, Sheriff." but I don't appreciate being accused of theft on my own property." After the sheriff departed, Eliza expected Kade to come inside, but instead, he went to the barn without a backward glance. His rigid posture told her everything she needed to know about his mood. She debated following him but decided against it. Instead, she returned to Sarah and their lesson, trying to focus on the present rather than the anxiety gnawing at her insides. By supper time, Kade had still not come in. Eliza sent Sarah to call him, and they ate in unusual silence, the tension palpable. After Sarah was in bed, Eliza waited in the kitchen, knowing Kade would want answers about Harris's cryptic comment. When he finally entered, his face was unreadable. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her at the table. "Harris's comment upset you," he said without preamble. "Why?" Eliza's hands tightened around her own cup. "It's complicated. I'm a fairly intelligent man, Miss Turner. I can handle complicated." She looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her over the past months, and knew she couldn't lie, not completely, but neither could she tell the whole truth. "I left Boston suddenly," she began, choosing her words carefully. "There was an incident. A man died. I wasn't responsible, but there were those who would have blamed me. I had to leave." Kade's expression remained neutral. "And April 15th, the night I left," she confirmed. "How Harris would know that, I can't imagine unless he has connections in Boston," Kade finished. "Or someone there has connections to him." Eliza nodded, fear coiling in her stomach. "If he knows about that night, he may know other things that could be misconstrued." "Are you in danger, Miss Turner?" Kade asked quietly. She hesitated. "I don't know. I thought I'd come far enough that no one would find me here." "Did you kill this man?" The question was direct, but his tone held no judgment. "No," she said firmly, "but I was there when he died, and there are powerful people who would prefer a convenient scapegoat to the truth." Kade was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes searching hers. Finally, he spoke. "Whatever happened in Boston, you're on my land now, under my protection. I won't let Harris or anyone else harm you." The simple declaration nearly undid her. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking back sudden tears. "But you don't even know what I've done, what I'm running from." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're kind to my daughter. I know you work hard and speak truthfully. I know you've brought light back into this house." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "The past is the past, Eliza. Out here, we judge people by their actions, not their histories." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it, combined with the warmth of his hand on hers, made her heart race. "Kade," she said softly, testing his name on her lips. "I wish I could tell you everything, but I can't, not yet." "When you're ready," he said, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it, "I'll be here." That night, Eliza lay awake long after the house had grown quiet, replaying their conversation. Kade's acceptance of her half-truths, his promise of protection, they touched her deeply. But she knew Harris's appearance was a warning. Her past was catching up to her, and when it did, it might destroy not only her newfound peace, but also any chance at a future with the man whose quiet strength had begun to heal her fractured heart. The following weeks brought no further confrontations with Harris, but his shadow loomed over the ranch. Kade increased patrols along the property boundaries and warned the hands to be vigilant. Meanwhile, the summer heat intensified, baking the land and further lowering the creek. Despite these tensions, or perhaps because of them, Eliza found herself drawing closer to Kade. Their evening conversations grew longer, their topics more personal. He told her about his journey west as a young man, about meeting Elizabeth when she came to teach at the town's first school, about his dreams for the ranch and for Sarah's future. In turn, Eliza shared carefully edited stories of her childhood in Boston, her love of literature, her desire to see the world beyond Massachusetts. She never mentioned the events that had driven her west, and Kade never pressed, though sometimes she caught him watching her with questions in his eyes. July 4th brought a welcome respite from the daily routine. The town of Willow Creek was hosting a celebration, and despite his wariness about Harris, Kade decided they should attend. "Sarah needs to see other children," he explained as they rode toward town in the wagon, Sarah bouncing excitedly between them. "And we could all use a day of celebration." The town square had been transformed with bunting and flags. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and a band was setting up on a makeshift stage. Children ran and played while adults gossiped in small groups, many turning to watch as the Bennett wagon arrived. "Mr. Bennett," the mayor greeted them, a jovial man with mutton chop whiskers. "Glad you could make it, and Miss Turner, lovely to see you again." Introductions followed as townspeople gathered to welcome them. Eliza noticed the curious glances, the whispered comments behind hands, and knew they were the subject of speculation. The handsome widower and his mysterious governess, she could only imagine the gossip that had circulated. Miss Turner, a plump woman in a purple dress, approached. "I'm Harriet Wilson, Tommy's mother. Sarah mentions you often in her letters to Tommy." "Mrs. Wilson," Eliza acknowledged with a polite smile, "it's nice to meet you." "Such a blessing for Mr. Bennett to find someone to look after little Sarah," Mrs. Wilson continued, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "And from Boston, I hear, such a long way to come." "Yes, quite a journey," Eliza replied noncommittally. "And what brought you all the way to Wyoming?" "Family troubles, perhaps, or a broken engagement." The questions were posed with feigned sympathy. Before Eliza could respond, Kade appeared at her side, his hand settling lightly at the small of her back. "Mrs. Wilson," he said coolly, "I believe your husband is looking for you by the lemonade stand." The woman flushed. "Oh, well, I should go find him. Lovely to meet you, Miss Turner." As she hurried away, Eliza exhaled, "Thank you." "The town busybody," Kade explained, his hand still warm against her back. "She means well, but she'd have your life story before the fireworks if given half a chance." "Speaking of fireworks," Eliza said, changing the subject, "Sarah seems quite excited about them." They both looked to where Sarah was playing with a group of children, her laughter carrying across the square. "It's good to see her so happy," Kade observed. "She's flourished with you around, Eliza." The use of her first name no longer seemed unusual, though it still sent a small thrill through her each time he said it. "She's a remarkable child. You've done well with her." "We've done well," he corrected softly. The implication that they were somehow partners in raising Sarah hung between them, neither acknowledging it directly but neither denying it either. The day progressed pleasantly. They shared a picnic lunch, listened to patriotic speeches, and watched sack races and horseshoe competitions. Kade even participated in a shooting contest, winning a blue ribbon that he promptly presented to Sarah with a flourish. As evening approached, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a golden glow over the festivities. The band struck up a lively tune and couples began to dance on a wooden platform set up for the occasion. "Dance with me," Kade said suddenly, holding out his hand to Eliza. She hesitated. "I'm not sure that's appropriate." "One dance," he insisted, his eyes warm in the lantern light. "It's a celebration, after all." Against her better judgment, Eliza placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. His arm circled her waist, drawing her closer than propriety strictly allowed, and they began to move to the music. "People are watching," she murmured, acutely aware of the eyes on them. "Let them," he replied, his voice low near her ear. "I don't care what they think." "You should," she countered. "This is your home. These people are your neighbors." "And you're important to me," he said simply. "To Sarah and to me." The declaration, spoken so matter-of-factly, caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a commotion at the edge of the square drew their attention. Raised voices, then a woman's scream. Kade's arm tightened around her. "Stay here," he instructed, already moving toward the disturbance. Ignoring his directive, Eliza followed, pushing through the gathering crowd until she could see what was happening. Tucker Harris stood swaying in the center of a cleared space, clearly drunk, a pistol in his hand pointed at another man on the ground. "Told you I'd find proof," Harris was slurring. Got a witness saw you with my bulls, Jensen. The man on the ground, one of Kade's ranch hands, Eliza realized was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. You're crazy, Harris, Jensen spat. I never touched your damn cattle. Sheriff Mills was approaching cautiously. Put the gun down, Tucker. This isn't the way to handle things. The law won't do nothing, Harris shouted. Bennett's got you all fooled with his high and mighty act, him and his fancy Boston whore. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face as Harris's bloodshot eyes found her. Yeah, I know all about you, he sneered. Got a letter from back east. Seems you're wanted for murder, Miss High and Mighty. Killed a man and ran west to hide. That's a lie, Kade said, his voice deadly quiet as he stepped forward. Put the gun down, Harris, before you say something you'll regret. Harris laughed, an ugly sound. Ask her about Richard Blackburn. Ask her why she ran from Boston with his blood on her hands. At the name, Eliza swayed, darkness edging her vision. Richard Blackburn, her employer, her tormentor, the man whose unwanted advances had turned to violence that terrible night. The man who had fallen and struck his head on the marble fireplace when she pushed him away. The man whose powerful family had immediately begun spinning a tale of theft and murder to protect their reputation. Eliza, Kade was looking at her now, confusion in his eyes. Before she could speak, Harris raised his gun. The bounty said dead or alive, and dead's easier. Several things happened at once. Sheriff Mills lunged for Harris. Kade shouted and moved toward Eliza, and a shot rang out, echoing across the suddenly silent square. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. Then Harris crumpled to the ground, blood blooming on his chest. Behind him stood one of Kade's other ranch hands, smoke still curling from the barrel of his revolver. He was going to shoot Miss Turner, the man said simply. Chaos erupted. Women screamed, children cried, men shouted. The sheriff knelt beside Harris, checking for signs of life while others restrained the ranch hand who had fired the shot. Kade reached Eliza, pulling her against him protectively. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands framing her face. She shook her head, unable to speak, her whole body trembling. He's dead, the sheriff announced grimly, rising from Harris's body. Someone in the crowd called out. What about what he said? About her being wanted for murder. All eyes turned to Eliza, who stood frozen in Kade's embrace. That's nonsense, Kade declared, his arm tightening around her. Miss Turner is employed by me and has my complete trust. But the damage was done. Whispers spread through the crowd, suspicious glances cast her way. The jovial holiday atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by tension and fear. Perhaps you should take Miss Turner and Sarah home, Bennett, the sheriff suggested quietly. I'll need statements from all of you tomorrow, but for now it's best if you leave. Kade nodded, his expression grim. Sarah, he called, and the girl emerged from where she'd been hiding behind a barrel, tears streaming down her face. Pa, she cried, running to him. There was a gun and a loud noise, and everyone was screaming. It's all right now, he soothed, lifting her into his arms. We're going home. The ride back to the ranch was silent save for Sarah's occasional sniffles. Eliza sat rigidly beside Kade, her mind racing. Her secret was out, at least part of it. Harris might be dead, but his accusations would live on in the minds of the townsfolk. And Kade, what must he be thinking? When they reached the ranch, Kade carried a now sleeping Sarah to her room while Eliza moved mechanically to the kitchen, lighting the lamp and putting water on to boil. It was what she always did in the evenings, prepare coffee for their nightly conversations. But tonight she dreaded what that conversation would entail. Kade appeared in the doorway as she was measuring coffee into the pot, his face unreadable in the lamplight. She's asleep, he said. Didn't even wake when I took off her shoes. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. Eliza, he said softly. Look at me. Slowly she raised her eyes to his. Was Harris telling the truth? About Boston? About this man Blackburn? She swallowed hard. Yes and no. I need more than that, he said, his voice still gentle but firm. I need to know what I'm defending. The water began to boil and Eliza turned to tend to it, grateful for the momentary distraction. When she spoke again, her back was to him. Richard Blackburn was my employer in Boston. I worked as a governess for his children. She took a steadying breath. He was a widower, wealthy, respected. But he developed an interest in me that I did not reciprocate. She heard Kade move further into the kitchen but didn't turn around. On April 15th, he had been drinking heavily. His children were away visiting relatives. He cornered me in the library and made advances. When I refused him, he became violent. Her voice shook slightly. I pushed him away from me and he fell. His head struck the marble edge of the fireplace. There was so much blood. He died, Kade asked quietly. Eliza nodded. By the time the doctor arrived, it was too late. Blackburn's brother was there. He'd come to discuss business. He took one look at the scene and accused me of attacking Richard, of trying to steal from him. He said no one would believe a governess over the Blackburn family. So you ran. I had no choice, she said, finally turning to face him. The Blackburns practically own Boston. They have judges and politicians in their pockets. It would have been my word against theirs, and who would believe me? A woman with no family, no connections. She blinked back tears. I took what little money I had saved and fled west that night, I thought. I'd gone far enough that they couldn't find me. Kade was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. You were defending yourself, he said finally. It was an accident. Yes, she whispered, but that doesn't matter to the Blackburns. They'll want someone to blame, someone to punish for Richard's death, and now everyone in town knows. Not everything, Kade pointed out. They know only what Harris claimed, that you're wanted for murder. They don't know the circumstances. Does it matter? They'll believe the worst. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. I should leave, first thing in the morning. It's not safe for me here anymore, and I won't bring trouble to you and Sarah. No. The word was spoken with such finality that Eliza looked up in surprise. Kade had moved closer, close enough that she could see the resolve in his eyes. You're not running again, not from this, not from us. Kade, listen to me, he interrupted, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. What happened in Boston was self-defense. You did nothing wrong. And I won't let you be punished for it, not by the Blackburns, not by this town, and certainly not by your own conscience. You don't understand, she protested. The Blackburns are powerful. If they've traced me here, then we'll face them together, he said firmly. This is my land, Eliza. My territory. Out here, a man or woman has the right to defend themselves. The conviction in his voice, the strength of his grip on her shoulders, they steadied her, calmed the panic that had been building since Harris's accusations. Why? She asked, searching his face. Why would you risk yourself, your reputation, your ranch for me? Kade's expression softened. Because these past months, watching you with Sarah, seeing how you've brought life back to this house. I've come to care for you, Eliza, more than I thought possible after Elizabeth died. The confession, so simply stated, stole her breath. I'm not asking anything of you, he continued. Not now, with all this hanging over us, but I want you to know that you have a place here if you want it, not just as Sarah's governess or as my housekeeper, but as whatever you want to be. Tears filled her eyes. I've come to care for you too, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Both of you, more than I should have allowed myself to. Kade's hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, his touch gentle. Then stay, fight this with me. Don't let them win by running. For a moment, she leaned into his touch, allowing herself to imagine it staying, building a life here, facing whatever came with Kade by her side. But the image of Harris's body crumpling to the ground flashed in her mind, a stark reminder of the violence that seemed to follow her. I need time, she said finally. To think, this has all happened so quickly, Kade nodded, reluctantly dropping his hands. Of course, take all the time you need, but promise me you won't leave without talking to me first. I promise, she agreed. As he left the kitchen, Eliza poured the now ready coffee into cups with trembling hands. She had told him the truth, most of it anyway, but she hadn't told him everything. Hadn't told him about the letter she'd found in Richard Blackburn's desk that night. The letter that had revealed corruption reaching to the highest levels of Boston society. hadn't told him that it wasn't just the accusation of murder the Blackburns feared, but the secrets she might expose. Secrets that made her far more dangerous to them alive than dead. The day after the 4th of July shooting was tense. Sheriff Mills arrived mid-morning to take their statements, his manner professional but troubled. "I need to know the truth, Miss Turner," he said as they sat in Kade's study. "Is there any substance to Harris's claims?" Eliza, having spent a sleepless night considering her options, decided on a version of the truth. "I was employed by Richard Blackburn in Boston. There was an incident in which he died accidentally. His family may have circulated stories painting me in a negative light, but I am not a murderer, Sheriff." Mills studied her for a long moment. "Harris received a letter about 2 weeks ago. Started drinking heavily after that, talking about rewards and Boston murderers. I didn't pay it much mind, he was always spinning tales when in his cups." "Do you have this letter?" Kade asked. The sheriff shook his head. "It'll be among his effects. His brother's coming from Cheyenne to claim the body and property." He sighed heavily. "I've known you to be an honest man, Bennett. If you vouch for Miss Turner, that carries weight with me." "I do," Kade said without hesitation. "Completely." "Even so," Mills continued, "this situation has stirred up the town. Might be wise to keep a low profile for a while, let things settle." After the sheriff left, Eliza found Sarah in the garden, listlessly pulling weeds. The girl had been subdued all morning, her usual chatter silenced by the previous night's events. "Sarah," Eliza said gently, kneeling beside her, "would you like to talk about what happened yesterday?" Sarah poked at the dirt with a stick. "That man said mean things about you, then he tried to hurt you and Mr. Jensen shot him." She looked up, her blue eyes troubled. "Is it true? Did you hurt someone in Boston?" Eliza chose her words carefully. "Sometimes adults find themselves in difficult situations where they have to protect themselves. I had to protect myself from a bad man and he got hurt. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. Like when Pa shot the wolf that was after the calves," Sarah said thoughtfully. "He didn't want to kill it, but he had to protect what was his." "Something like that," Eliza agreed, touched by the child's simple understanding. "Are you going to leave us?" Sarah asked suddenly, her voice small. "Because of what happened," Eliza's heart clenched. "I don't know," she admitted. "I care about you and your father very much, but sometimes caring about people means doing what's best for them, even if it's hard." "But what's best is for you to stay," Sarah insisted. "Pa smiles more when you're here and her voice wavered. "I pretend sometimes that you're my mama." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. "Oh, Sarah," the girl threw her arms around Eliza's neck. "Please don't go, please." Eliza held her close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and childhood that clung to her hair. "I'll try," she whispered. "I'll try to find a way to stay." The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and tension. They continued their routine of lessons, meals, and chores, but there was an undercurrent of waiting, of watchfulness. Kade increased security around the ranch, assigning men to patrol the boundaries day and night. No one from town visited, not even the usual peddlers or neighboring ranchers who occasionally stopped by. The isolation should have been oppressive, but Eliza found it oddly freeing. Without the pressure of outside eyes, the three of them settled into a comfortable rhythm that felt increasingly like family. Kade worked the ranch during the day but made a point of returning for supper every evening, often bringing small gifts, a wildflower for Sarah, a book he thought Eliza might enjoy, fresh berries from a hidden patch he'd discovered. Their evening conversations continued, but there was a new openness between them. Kade spoke more freely of his hopes for the ranch, of his struggle after Elizabeth's death, of his fears for Sarah growing up without a mother. Eliza, in turn, shared more of her past, her childhood in a modest Boston home, her father's early death, her mother's struggle to support them, her decision to become a governess when her mother passed away. What she didn't share were her fears about the Blackburns and what they might do if they found her. But as days turned into a week with no further incidents, she began to hope that perhaps Harris's death had severed the connection to her past. Then, on a warm morning in mid-July, a stranger rode onto the rocking bee. Eliza was hanging laundry when she spotted him, a well-dressed man on an expensive-looking horse, approaching the house with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect. Something about his bearing sent a chill down her spine even before she recognized him, James Blackburn. Richard's younger brother. She froze, the damp sheet still in her hands as he dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post. He hadn't seen her yet, his attention on the house. "Mr. Bennett," he called, knocking on the front door, "I'd like a word." Eliza's mind raced. Kade was checking the north pasture with two of the hands. Sarah was inside, supposedly practicing her penmanship. She could grab the girl and run to the creek, hide until Kade returned. Or she could face James Blackburn and end this once and for all. Before she could decide, the front door opened and Sarah peered out. "Pa's not here," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the still morning air. "He's checking the cattle." "I see," Blackburn replied smoothly. "And you are?" "Sarah Bennett. Who are you?" "James Blackburn. I'm looking for someone who might be staying here, a woman named Eliza Turner." Sarah hesitated, glancing over to where Eliza stood partially hidden by the hanging sheet. Their eyes met and Eliza gave a small nod. There was no point in hiding now. "I'm Eliza Turner," she said, stepping forward, setting down her laundry basket with hands that only trembled slightly. Blackburn turned, his expression registering surprise before settling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Turner, how convenient. I was afraid I might have to search all of Wyoming territory to find you." "What do you want, Mr. Blackburn?" she asked, moving to stand between him and Sarah, who had come out onto the porch. "Justice for my brother's death," he said simply. "I've come to escort you back to Boston to face trial." "There won't be a trial," she countered. "Only a foregone conclusion orchestrated by your family." His smile thinned. "Perhaps, but that's for the courts to decide, isn't it?" "I think not." Kade's voice cut through the tension as he rode into the yard, having apparently returned earlier than expected. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "This is private property, sir. State your business or leave." Blackburn regarded him coolly. "You must be Bennett. I'm James Blackburn, here on legitimate business concerning this woman who is wanted for the murder of my brother in Boston." "Miss Turner has explained the circumstances of your brother's death," Kade replied, his voice level but with an underlying steel. "It was self-defense, plain and simple." "Is that what she told you?" Blackburn's laugh was brittle. "That my respected philanthropic brother attacked her? How convenient. Unfortunately, the physical evidence and witness testimonies suggest otherwise." "What witnesses?" Eliza demanded. "There was no one there but your brother and me until after he fell. You forget Simmons, the butler. He heard you arguing with Richard, heard you threaten him when he caught you trying to steal from his safe." "That's a lie," Eliza exclaimed. "Simmons wasn't even in the house that night." "And I never touched the safe." Blackburn shrugged. "It's your word against his and against mine as I arrived to find you standing over my brother's body." "After the fact," she insisted. "Details that can be clarified at trial," he said dismissively. "Now, if you'll pack your things, Miss Turner, we can be on our way. I have a warrant for your arrest signed by Judge Sullivan of the Massachusetts Superior Court." He reached into his coat and produced an official-looking document which he held out to Kade. "You can see everything is in order." Kade took the paper, examining it carefully before looking up. "This may be valid in Massachusetts, Mr. Blackburn, but you're in Wyoming territory now. You have no authority here." "The warrant is recognized under federal law," Blackburn countered. "And I've already spoken with your local sheriff, who has agreed to honor it." "Sheriff Mills agreed to this?" Kade asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "He had little choice in the matter," Blackburn said smugly. "The law is the law, Mr. Bennett, even in this frontier setting." Throughout this exchange, Sarah had remained on the porch, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Now she darted forward, grabbing Eliza's hand. "You can't take her. She belongs here with us." "Sarah," Kade said sharply, "go inside now." "But Pa, now, Sarah." His tone brooked no argument. Reluctantly, the girl obeyed, casting one last pleading look at Eliza before disappearing into the house. Once she was gone, Kade's demeanor changed subtly. His posture straightened, his eyes hardened. "Mr. Blackburn, I suggest you return to town and discuss this matter with the sheriff and myself in a proper setting. Miss Turner isn't going anywhere today." Blackburn's pleasant facade slipped, revealing a cold anger beneath. "I don't think you understand the situation, Bennett. This woman killed my brother. She stole valuable documents from his home. She is coming with me one way or another." "Documents?" Kade's gaze shifted to Eliza. "What documents?" A moment of truth had arrived. Eliza took a deep breath. "The real reason the Blackburns want me back in Boston," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The night Richard died, I found letters in his desk correspondence between him and several government officials detailing bribes, fixed contracts, embezzlement of public funds. When James found me with Richard's body, I had those letters in my possession." "More lies," Blackburn snapped. "There were no such documents." "Then why mention them now?" Kade asked shrewdly. "If they don't exist, how could she have stolen them?" Blackburn's face flushed with anger. "Enough of this. Miss Turner, you are coming with me now, or I will return with the sheriff and as many men as necessary to take you by force." "You'll do no such thing," Kade said, his hand moving to his gun. "This is my land, Blackburn. You're trespassing and you're threatening a member of my household. I suggest you leave while you still can." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then Blackburn smiled thinly. "Very well, Bennett, have it your way for now." He turned to Eliza. "This isn't over, Miss Turner, not by a long shot." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, his straight back radiating confidence and menace. Once he was out of sight, Eliza's knees nearly buckled with relief. Kade was at her side instantly, his arm around her waist supporting her. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded, though in truth she felt far from all right. "He'll be back," she said. "With the sheriff, just as he threatened." "Let him come," Kade said grimly. "We'll be ready." Inside, they found Sarah sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, her face tear-streaked. She jumped up when they entered, flinging herself at Eliza. "You can't go with that bad man," she cried. "You can't leave us." Eliza knelt, hugging the child close. "I don't want to leave you, Sarah." "Never think that." Over Sarah's head, her eyes met Kade's. "But I won't bring danger to your door either if Blackburn returns with the sheriff and men." "We'll deal with that when it happens," Kade said firmly. "For now, we need to think. Blackburn mentioned documents, the letters you found. Do you still have them?" Eliza hesitated, then nodded. "They're sewn into the lining of my carpetbag. I never read them all, there wasn't time, but I knew they were important by the way Richard reacted when he caught me in his study." "Those letters may be our leverage," Kade mused. "If they're as damning as you believe, the Blackburns would want them back at any cost." "But I can't prove what's in them without revealing I have them," Eliza pointed out. "And once Blackburn knows for certain I have the letters, I become even more of a target." "Unless we can find a way to make those letters public," Kade suggested. "Or at least threaten to do so in a way that's credible." Sarah, who had been listening to this exchange with growing confusion, tugged at Eliza's sleeve. "What are you talking about? What letters?" "Adult matters, sweetheart," Eliza said gently. "Nothing for you to worry about. But I want to help," the girl insisted. "I don't want you to go away." Kade ruffled his daughter's hair. "The best way you can help is by being brave and doing as you're told. Now, why don't you go upstairs and work on your lessons while Miss Turner and I talk?" Once Sarah had reluctantly gone upstairs, Kade led Eliza to the kitchen where they could speak privately. "Show me these letters," he said. Eliza retrieved her carpetbag from her room and carefully unpicked a section of the lining, extracting several folded documents. She spread them on the table, and together they began to read. What they found confirmed Eliza's suspicions. The letters detailed a complex scheme of bribes, kickbacks, and fixed government contracts involving not only the Blackburn family business but several high-ranking officials in Massachusetts. including a state senator and a federal judge. "This is damning evidence," Kade said after they had read through everything. "No wonder they're so desperate to get you back to Boston." "But how does this help us?" Eliza asked. "Even if we threaten to make these public, it would take time we don't have if Blackburn returns with the sheriff today." Kade thought for a moment. "We need allies, people who would stand with us against Blackburn and his influence." He stood suddenly. "I have an idea. But we need to move quickly. Gather these letters and anything else you value. We're riding to town." "Town, but Blackburn will expect us to stay here to fortify the ranch," Kade finished. "He won't expect us to bring the fight to him." Within the hour, they were ready. Kade had instructed 2 of his most trusted hands to remain at the ranch with Sarah, with strict orders to hide her in the root cellar if Blackburn returned with forces. Then he, Eliza, and 2 other ranch hands rode toward Willow Creek. As they approached the town, Eliza's anxiety mounted. "What exactly is your plan?" she asked Kade, who rode beside her. "To turn public opinion in your favor," he replied. "Blackburn thinks he can use the law against you because he controls the narrative. We're going to change that narrative." Their first stop was the office of the Willow Creek Gazette, a small weekly newspaper run by a former Eastern journalist named Howard Grant. Grant was known for his principled stance and refusal to bow to pressure from the town's more influential citizens. "Bennett," Grant greeted them as they entered his cluttered office. "Heard you had some excitement out at your place this morning. Blackburn was bragging about it at the hotel." "Then you know why we're here," Kade said. "We need your help, Grant." "My help?" The editor raised an eyebrow. "With what exactly?" Setting the record straight, Kade gestured to Eliza. "Miss Turner has been accused of crimes she didn't commit. We have evidence that the real criminals are the ones pursuing her." Grant leaned back in his chair, studying them. "That's a bold claim, Bennett." "What kind of evidence?" Eliza stepped forward, placing the letters on Grant's desk. "These documents detail corruption at the highest levels of Massachusetts government, orchestrated in part by the Blackburn family. They're the real reason James Blackburn wants me back in Boston, not to face justice for his brother's death, but to silence me." The editor picked up the letters, scanning them with the practiced eye of a journalist. His expression grew increasingly serious as he read. "These are genuine?" he asked finally. "Yes," Eliza confirmed. "Taken from Richard Blackburn's desk the night he died, the night he attacked me when I discovered them." Grant whistled softly. "This is dynamite, Miss Turner, the kind that could blow apart more than just the Blackburns." "Will you help us?" Kade pressed. "Blackburn has convinced Sheriff Mills to honor an arrest warrant from Massachusetts. He could return to the ranch at any moment with men to take Eliza by force." The editor drummed his fingers on his desk, thinking. "I can publish what's in these letters," he said slowly. "But that alone won't stop Blackburn. He'll claim they're forgeries, and it would take time to verify them with sources back east." "We don't have time," Eliza said desperately. "No," Grant agreed, "but you do have something else on your side." He looked at Kade. "The respect of this community, Bennett. Despite what happened at the 4th of July celebration, people trust you, and they know Harris was a troublemaker who had it in for you." "What are you suggesting?" Kade asked. "A town meeting," Grant said decisively. "Right now, before Blackburn can organize his return to your ranch. We'll get everyone together, present your case, show them these letters, and let the town decide whether to stand with you or with an outsider trying to force his will on one of their own." It was a risky plan, dependent on the goodwill of people who had already heard the worst about Eliza. But as Kade pointed out, it was their best chance to turn the tide of public opinion. Within the hour, the church bell was ringing, summoning townsfolk to an emergency meeting. As people filed into the town's small church, curious and concerned, Eliza felt her nervousness grow. These were the same people who had witnessed Harris's accusations and death just days ago. Would they even listen to her side of the story? Kade seemed to sense her anxiety. As they waited for the church to fill, he took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever happens," he said quietly. We face it together. You're not alone anymore, Eliza. The simple declaration steadied her. She wasn't alone. For the first time since fleeing Boston, she had someone standing firmly by her side, someone who believed in her without reservation. The realization filled her with a warmth that pushed back against her fear. Mayor Wilson called the meeting to order, his face grave as he explained that serious allegations had been made against a resident of their community and that both sides deserved a fair hearing. Then he invited Kade to speak. Kade stood, his presence commanding attention without effort. "Many of you know me," he began. "I've lived in this valley for 15 years, built my ranch from nothing, raised my daughter here after my wife passed. I've always tried to be honest and fair in my dealings with all of you." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the church. 4 months ago, Miss Eliza Turner came to my ranch seeking employment as a governess for my daughter. In that time, she has proven herself to be kind, hardworking, and honest. Sarah has flourished under her care, and my home has become a place of warmth again. He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd. Now a man from Boston, James Blackburn, has come to take her away, claiming she murdered his brother. I'm here to tell you that's not true. A voice from the back called out. Harris said she was wanted for murder, said there was a reward. Tucker Harris was a known liar and troublemaker, Kade replied calmly. But even liars can tell partial truths. Yes, the Blackburns want Miss Turner back in Boston, not because she's a murderer, but because she knows too much about their illegal activities. With that, he gestured to Grant, who distributed copies of the most damning letters to key members of the community: the minister, the bank manager, the doctor, and several prominent business owners. As they read, their expressions changed from skepticism to shock. These letters, Kade continued, detail bribery, corruption, and embezzlement by the Blackburn family and their associates. Miss Turner discovered them the night Richard Blackburn died while attempting to attack her when she confronted him about their contents. A murmur ran through the crowd, louder this time. Eliza could see people leaning together, whispering, reassessing what they'd heard. I didn't kill Richard Blackburn, she said, finding her voice at last. I defended myself from his unwanted advances and he fell, striking his head. It was a tragic accident, but his family couldn't risk the truth coming out not just about his death, but about these documents. So they created a story painting me as a thief and murderer, knowing no one would believe a mere governess over the powerful Blackburn family. Why should we believe you now? Someone called out. Because the evidence is right there in those letters, Grant answered, stepping forward. I've been a journalist for 20 years. I know genuine documents when I see them. These are real, and they implicate not just the Blackburns but judges and politicians who would be only too happy to see Miss Turner silenced. The church doors opened, and Sheriff Mills entered, followed by James Blackburn. A hush fell over the gathering. What's all this? The sheriff asked, taking in the scene with evident surprise. A town meeting, Sheriff, Mayor Wilson replied, concerning the allegations against Miss Turner. Blackburn's face darkened with anger when he spotted Eliza and Kade. This is outrageous, he sputtered. That woman is wanted for murder. Sheriff, you have a duty to arrest her. The sheriff has a duty to justice, Kade countered. And the people of this town have a right to know who they're being asked to side with. He nodded to the bank manager. Mr. Reynolds, would you mind sharing what you've just read? The banker stood, adjusting his spectacles. These letters appear to detail a scheme to defraud the Massachusetts State Treasury of nearly $1 million through false contracts and kickbacks. If genuine, they implicate Mr. Blackburn and his late brother in serious crimes. Forgeries, Blackburn spat. Obvious forgeries created by a desperate murderess. Are they? Grant challenged. Because I've already sent telegrams to newspaper colleagues in Boston, Chicago, and New York with copies of select passages. By this time tomorrow, these allegations will be public knowledge across the country. If they're forgeries, that will come to light, but if they're genuine. He let the implication hang in the air. Blackburn paled visibly. You had no right, he had every right. the minister interjected. As do we all to protect one of our own from false accusations and persecution. Eliza was startled by the declaration. One of our own, the phrase warmed her more than she could express. The sheriff, who had been reading one of the letters handed to him, looked up with troubled eyes. Mr. Blackburn, these are serious allegations. If there's any truth to them, executing this arrest warrant becomes problematic. The warrant is valid, Blackburn insisted. Signed by a judge implicated in these very letters, Grant pointed out. Judge Sullivan, who apparently received $20,000 to rule favorably in a Blackburn shipping case last year. The tide was turning. Eliza could feel it in the shifting mood of the crowd, see it in the uncertain expression on the sheriff's face, the growing desperation in Blackburn's eyes. This is absurd, Blackburn said, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't possibly believe the word of this woman over mine. I'm a respected businessman. And I'm a rancher, Kade interrupted. A man who's lived among these people for 15 years, building trust through actions, not words. He stepped closer to Blackburn. You came to my land, threatened a member of my household, and tried to use the law as a weapon. But the law works both ways, Mr. Blackburn. Those letters detail federal crimes. How do you think a territorial judge would react if we brought them to his attention? It was a bluff. They had no guarantee a territorial judge would take their side, but the threat hit home. Blackburn's composure cracked. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he hissed. The Blackburn family has connections everywhere. This isn't over. Yes, Kade said quietly, it is. You're going to leave Willow Creek today, Mr. Blackburn. You're going to return to Boston and forget about Miss Turner. Because if any harm comes to her, if another bounty hunter or lawman shows up looking for her, those letters will find their way to every newspaper and government office in the country. The sheriff cleared his throat. I think that's fair, Mr. Blackburn. I can't in good conscience enforce this warrant given the circumstances. I suggest you take Mr. Bennett's offer and leave peacefully. For a moment, it seemed Blackburn might continue to fight. But looking around at the now openly hostile faces of the townspeople, he apparently thought better of it. This is a mistake, he said stiffly. All of you will regret interfering in matters you don't understand. Perhaps, the mayor replied, but we understand right from wrong well enough. And threatening a woman who defended herself seems wrong to most of us here. With a final venomous glare at Eliza and Kade, Blackburn stormed out of the church. Through the open doors, they watched him mount his horse and gallop away in the direction of the train station. A collective breath seemed to release from the gathering. People began to talk amongst themselves, many approaching Eliza with words of support or apology for having doubted her. The sheriff promised to telegraph authorities in Boston to verify her story about Richard Blackburn's death. Though he assured her, he saw no reason to hold her in the meantime. As the meeting broke up, Kade found her sitting quietly in a pew, emotion overwhelming her after the intensity of the confrontation. It's over, he said softly, sitting beside her. He's gone. For now, she replied, but you were right about the letters. They were our leverage. They were, he agreed. But it was more than that. It was the people here choosing to stand with us. With you. Eliza looked around at the now emptying church, at the familiar faces of people she'd come to know over the past months. People who had just defended her against a powerful outsider, despite the scandal and confusion of recent days. I never expected to find a community like this, she admitted. In Boston, I was always on the outside looking in. Here you belong, Kade finished for her, with these people. With Sarah, he took her hand. With me, if you want. The simple question held worlds of meaning. Eliza looked into his blue eyes, seeing in them everything she'd come to hope for but had been afraid to acknowledge. I do want that, she whispered. More than I've wanted anything in a very long time. His smile was like the breaking of dawn after the longest night. Then let's go home, he said. Sarah will be worried sick. They rode back to the ranch side by side, the tension of the past days finally easing from Eliza's shoulders. The afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt truly free from fear, free from the past, free to embrace the future that now stretched before her like the vast Wyoming sky. Sarah was waiting on the porch when they arrived, having ignored the ranch hand's instructions to stay hidden. She flew down the steps as they dismounted, flinging herself at both of them. "You came back," she cried. "Both of you." "Of course we did," Kade said, lifting her into his arms. "This is home." The simple declaration brought tears to Eliza's eyes. Home. After so long without one, the word held a sweetness she could scarcely comprehend. That evening, after Sarah was asleep, Kade and Eliza sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in a closeness that felt both new and perfectly natural. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft in the quiet night. "Now," he said thoughtfully, "we go on living. I run my ranch, you teach Sarah. We face whatever comes next together." "Together," she repeated, savoring the word. "I like the sound of that." Kade shifted, turning to face her more directly. "I have something to ask you, Eliza, something I've been wanting to ask for a while now." Her heart quickened. "Yes. When you first came here, looking for work as a maid, I told you I wasn't hiring." His lips curved in a smile. "Do you remember what I said? You said I wasn't hired, I was already indispensable," she recalled, returning his smile. "I meant it then, but I didn't know how true it would become." He took both her hands in his. "You're not just indispensable to this household, Eliza. You're indispensable to me, to my heart." Tears blurred her vision as he continued. "I don't want you as my maid or even just as Sarah's governess. I want you as my wife, my partner, my forever. If you'll have me." For a moment she couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought her to this porch, to this man, to this moment of perfect clarity. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll have you, Kade Bennett, for as long as forever lasts." He cupped her face gently, as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever held. "I think forever is just the beginning," he murmured, before his lips met hers in a kiss that felt like coming home at last. 2 months later, on a crisp September day with the cottonwoods just beginning to turn gold, Eliza Turner became Eliza Bennett in a simple ceremony in the Willow Creek Church. Sarah stood proudly as her attendant, beaming as she finally, officially, gained the mother she'd been longing for. The entire town turned out for the celebration, their earlier suspicions forgotten in the face of the couple's obvious happiness. Even Sheriff Mills, who had received confirmation from Boston authorities that Richard Blackburn's death had indeed been ruled accidental after new evidence came to light, offered heartfelt congratulations. As Kade and Eliza danced under the stars at their wedding celebration, he pulled her close and whispered, "Remember the day you came looking for work?" She smiled up at him. "How could I forget? I was desperate, exhausted, and terrified. And I told you you weren't hired," he reminded her. "You were my forever instead." "You didn't say that," she laughed. "Not exactly." "Well, I should have," he said, spinning her gently under his arm, "because that's what you are, Eliza Bennett, not my maid, not my governess, but my forever." As they swayed beneath the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by friends who had become family, Eliza knew that her journey west had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Not just to a place of safety from her past, but to a future filled with love, purpose, and belonging. A future that would indeed last forever. 5 years later, the Rocking Bee Ranch had prospered beyond even Kade's ambitious dreams. The creek that had once been a point of contention now supported lush pastures where twice as many cattle grazed. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family Sarah, now 13 and blossoming into a confident young woman, and the twin boys, James and William, boisterous 3-year-olds who had their father's blue eyes and their mother's determination. Eliza stood on the porch, watching as Kade taught Sarah how to gentle a new colt in the corral, her heart full with the simple perfection of the scene. The fear that had driven her west was now just a distant memory. The Blackburn scandal had eventually broken in Boston without her direct involvement, as Grant's newspaper contacts had indeed pursued the story, leading to investigations, indictments, and the collapse of the family's influence. She had received a letter from Boston just last month, not a threat, but an apology from Richard Blackburn's daughter, now grown and eager to make amends for her family's actions. The past was finally, truly laid to rest. As if sensing her thoughts, Kade looked up from the corral, finding her with unerring accuracy. He smiled, that same smile that had first warmed her heart on a dusty April day 5 years ago, and waved. Eliza waved back, thinking of how far they had come together. She had arrived at the Rocking Bee desperate for work, seeking only shelter and safety. What she had found instead was a home, a family, and a love that grew stronger with each passing season. Not hired but cherished. Not a maid but a partner. Not temporary but forever. And forever, she had discovered, was just the beginning of their story.